Hello and welcome to another episode of Alan Stead Reviews. Sorry this one took a bit longer. Having said I was going to try and speed things up a bit. You know what, I'm not even going to make that kind of promise. These videos are going to take as long as they're going to take because I've got to get them right. I just want to say the right things. And this one was especially important because it's about Star Wars, which is something that's very close to my heart. I don't want to go into too much of a spiel here at the beginning because I just want to go through it and I'll explain what I want to say along the way. Suffice to say, Star Wars has played a very important part in my life. I would like to thank my brother for providing the various Star Wars props you see behind me, and one that will appear a bit later on as well. They're all his, basically. And important note that if you are new to Star Wars and you haven't seen the Star Wars saga at all, which is probably not most of you watching this, but if you are, there's going to be spoilers definitely in this, but I'll maybe try and avoid saying the really obvious things just in case you decide to end up watching it anyway. But yeah, you must do what you feel is right, of course. Now, in this video, as per the title, I'm going to be ranking all the 11 Star Wars movies that have been so far released as of 2023 when I've recorded this. Now, there is obviously the new Rey trilogy is going to start in 2026, so I'll obviously update this video or what have you. Now, just in case any of you are slightly angered or whatever by the fact I'm not going to be including the animated movie, The Clone Wars, I sort of feel that's sort of separate to the live action ones. There's a kind of zone I go into when watching Star Wars, and animation is a kind of different sort of thing. Also, I'm just going to mention the two Ewok adventures from 1984 and 1985. They were made for TV films and they were absolutely awful. I do have some fond childhood memories of watching them. I don't even think I thought they were particularly great when I watched them as a kid. Second one, surprisingly dark considering the audience it's aimed at, but it's slightly better than the first one. They're just, don't worry about them. They're not canon to me. But yeah, there we go. I am looking forward to doing this. Here we go. So, what do we have lurking at the bottom of the pile? In at number 11 is Solo. And there is the outer cardboard sleeve as well. This is the only Star Wars movie I didn't see at the cinema, and a lot of that is due to the fact that I didn't really feel I needed this as a Star Wars movie, and kind of the pacing of it almost would have worked perhaps better as being a TV series, albeit one that I wouldn't have necessarily been that excited about either, actually. Now, from the offset, this movie was always going to have a bit of an uphill struggle because Han Solo as a character was played so definitively by Harrison Ford that anyone trying to step into his shoes was always going to fall short. Now, of course, the same goes for Obi-Wan Kenobi, but with that, there was an inevitability that someone was going to have to play his role. And I think although it wasn't done perfectly, I do really like Ewan McGregor as an actor, and he grows into it. But that was always going to happen because that was a prequel trilogy that was destined to be. With this movie, it's a different thing. Alden Ehrenreich, forgive me if I'm saying his surname wrong there, does a good job at playing Han Solo, and indeed Donald Glover of playing Lando Calrissian. But, you know, both of them, they've got to live up to the original actors who played those roles. But they do a good enough job. And Emilia Clarke's great, and the villain is actually pretty decent. It's just not particularly interesting as a plot. And the reveal at the end of with revealing the character from the prequels who comes back, it's like, right, okay, well, I thought that person was dead, and now that I'm meant to feel excited about that, whereas in fact I felt sort of almost slightly irritated by it. If you were into the expanded universe stuff, you would have known that he had carried on, and also it left it like it was going to go somewhere else afterwards. It's not, yeah, I like the fact that you discover the little pod gets released from the Millennium Falcon, therefore it's got the gap. That's a nice touch. The weakest element, I have to say, is L337 is the most irritating character in the entire Star Wars franchise. And that's quite an achievement because this is a franchise that includes Jar Jar Binks. Well, the film franchise anyway. Also, I should point out that the lighting in a lot of the scenes in this movie is pretty poor. And maybe that's to conceal some bad computer graphics, and we're probably spared some of them. I just, 6 out of 10. It's okay. Number 10, The Phantom Menace. Now, of all the Star Wars movies, this is probably the one that people hate the most. And yeah, with good reason. But in its defense, if you just look at it as being a good, fun kids movie, which seems to be the audience it's kind of aiming itself at, it's kind of pretty decent. That being said, yes, Jar Jar Binks is incredibly annoying, and I don't know why they chose to make that character. And the appalling scenes like going through the center, the planet's core, and just lines like "there's always a bigger fish." I don't think they should have gone with including R2-D2 and C-3PO in the prequel trilogy. I think maybe having a cameo appearance at some point would have been a good idea, but especially having C-3PO being built originally by Anakin Skywalker is just it's something I wouldn't have done. It doesn't add anything, put it that way. But let's go with the positives. Liam Neeson is a real good anchor point within this movie. Ewan McGregor, great as well, but Liam Neeson really does hold stuff together. The original Yoda in this movie was a terrible puppet. Considering how great the original puppet was, I don't know how they got that so badly wrong, but for the later releases, they've corrected that and matched it up to the CGI version of Yoda from the next two movies. As for the pod race, despite the fact its inclusion is a bit dubious plot-wise, and it's hopelessly over the top with regards to the action scenes that happen in it, it's actually really fun to watch. You've also the best thing about the whole movie is the Darth Maul fight scene, and great music, Duel of the Fates. Just everything about that scene is great. It's a pity that it's kind of interspersed between sort of flashing to the ridiculous space battle where Anakin just accidentally wins the entire battle by blowing up the power generator without realizing he's done it. You've got the Gungans battle, which just feels like something out of a Pixar movie. As good as some of the shots, maybe with the shield coming down, looks quite good. Most of it is just ridiculous. You know, it's all over the place. But if you just embrace it as being quite silly and fun, 7 out of 10. Number 9, Attack of the Clones. Now, a strong point in this movie is the city of Coruscant, which you do actually see a little bit in The Phantom Menace, a little bit more now in the extended DVD and Blu-ray cuts compared to the original theatrical version. But mostly it's kept for this movie. You get to really see it properly, and the car chase through the city is quite, as over the top as it is really quite fun to watch on screen. The whole backstory with of Boba Fett, including Jango Fett, regardless of whether you like the connection they made with him and the clone troopers, the scenes including him are actually pretty decent, and you get to see a fight between him and Obi-Wan and the rocket pack on quite a cool wild sea planet. As for the whole love story between Anakin and Padme, yes, it is a bit clunky and there's some very poor dialogue in it, but I don't mind it as much as some people do. Padme does slightly forgive Anakin a bit too easily for murdering all the women and children sand people. Let's get to the stadium sequence, which of course is immediately preceded by the factory sequence in which C-3PO's head gets swapped with one of the, what I'll call them, the Roger droids. I don't know why they tried to make them so comical. And that whole sequence plays out like something like a Carry On film, and lines like "I'm quite beside myself" and "what a drag." It's just like, why are you putting that in the movie? Now, I do like the whole Mace Windu confrontation with Jango Fett, as brief as that is. I think that's the one highlight in that entire sequence. And then you have at the end the fight with Count Dooku, who I think is Christopher Lee's great, and the fight with Yoda. As much as that is really cool, and when we saw it at the cinema, I remember there was almost a bit of a sort of cheer and he's getting his lightsaber out, and it's a good fun confrontation, but it's a little bit comical at the same time. So it's no Darth Maul fight, put it that way. It's also worth mentioning the silliness of Obi-Wan's line when Anakin jumps out of the car and goes, "Oh, I hate it when he does that." Really, that comes up a lot, does he? He jumps out of flying vehicles through moving traffic. I don't know. And as for Anakin Skywalker saying, I have a bad feeling about this in the stadium when they're about to be clearly eaten alive by monsters. I mean, what is there to feel good about that? When Han Solo says it originally, it makes a lot more sense and it's entirely appropriate. They're obviously paying lip service to the thing, oh, that's that thing Han Solo says, but it just makes no sense for him to say it in this context. So yeah, there's various bits that I just think are ridiculous. But yeah, same really, 7. Number 8, The Rise of Skywalker. And there is the slipcase that comes with it there as well. It's a real shame that with this sequel trilogy, they didn't have a through story that they just decided to stick to going throughout these movies. The Last Jedi basically took things off on a tangent from The Force Awakens. There was a whole backlash against that movie. A lot of people didn't like it. So this one decided to yet again go off in another direction, bringing back the arch villain of Star Wars, the original trilogy and the prequels, in the form of Ian McDiarmid, who plays a great role in this movie, and he's strong whatever he plays. But I just think the whole sort of over-the-top power demonstrated at the end, as good as bits of it are, just doesn't really work for me. Also, yes, the Death Star was very conclusively destroyed at the end of Return of the Jedi. I mean, I saw it on the screen. It was... there was nothing left to fall into the sea. So that entire scene, it just really irritated me. And let's not forget, the only reason it's included in the movie in the first place is to provide another clue in the ongoing ridiculous treasure hunt sequence that continues throughout this film. And it's just, well, none of that makes any sense. It's clearly just a vehicle to get them to the Sith planet at the end, and the logic of how they get from one step to another is just non-existent, basically, for the most part. As for another thing that annoys me, I really get irritated by the disregarding of the hyperspace rules, where they're just jumping in and out of hyperspace. I just think that's a silly, over-the-top sort of thing. And just to moan about one more thing, I do not buy into the whole romantic feelings that Rey and, well, we'll call him Ben Solo for the sake of this bit, have for each other. No. But in fairness to this movie, despite having a terrible plot, it is still quite fun to watch. So I will give it that. Let's talk about the things I do like. I think they handled the passing of Carrie Fisher very respectfully, but using the scenes that they'd filmed before. And I think that was there was an emotional aspect to that. Han Solo's appearance. And it's just a shame that Rey didn't really have a character arc that sort of really felt that fulfilled. Finn didn't really get one at all, and it just sort of feels like 7 out of 10. Number 7, The Last Jedi. This movie proved to be very divisive among Star Wars fans. I was one of the people that didn't really like it when I went to see it. It was my first cinematic disappointment of seeing a Star Wars film. They got the whole chase sequence that goes on for a long period of time through space and just doesn't really seem to have a lot of energy to it. The whole mutiny on board thing makes very little sense, and you kind of feel that could have just been solved with a bit of basic communication. Then you had the whole tangent where they kind of go off to the casino planet, which is just, everything in that is just really irritating, and the whole purpose of it is just so pointless. They get a bit of a dodgy guy to come back to help them deactivate the thing, but then he betrays them, and it just, I don't know, it all just seems a bit nonsense really. And the whole thing of Leia being blown out into space, actually, I'm not so fussed about that. I just think it was poorly executed. I do really like all the scenes to do with Luke on the island. I don't agree with what they did with his backstory at all. I just don't believe that his character would have gone down that route. The person who brought Anakin Skywalker back from the dark side and stood up to the Emperor, for him to have then gone down that other route, I just don't believe that would have happened with the character, nor did Mark Hamill, if you see any interviews with him. But I think, considering that was what he was given as a remit, I think he does a great job with it. And Yoda, is nice seeing him in puppet form, proper puppet form again. The strongest part of this movie for me is the throne room sequence. I think everything, the little twist that happens there, and I think that's just a really strong scene, and it's unexpected, and that's really cool. I also really like the long distance communication connection between Kylo and Rey. I think that's a very interesting element to the story. The highlights of this movie punch above that of The Force Awakens, but the lowlights keep the overall movie below that one in my estimation. It's another 7 out of 10. Number 6, The Force Awakens. Now, to be honest with you, there's not an awful lot in it between this and the two movies that followed on afterwards. I just think there's less annoying moments in here. Rey and Finn seem on more of an equal footing in this movie. Like, they basically both have pretty good plots. I love the whole thing of Finn rather, starting off as being a stormtrooper and having this change of heart. That's something they really could have explored more, but sadly they didn't. Rey introduced very well in the desert, and they've got the whole sort of scenes of the crashed Star Destroyer and you know, the Attack Walker. It's a really nice touch visually. It's a bit convenient, yes, that they find the Millennium Falcon just when they happen to need a ship, and it just happens to be that one. And they do fly it and use the weapons on it extremely well, considering they've never flown it before. And you suddenly got a sequence where they're just flying through the ruins of a Star Destroyer, where it's just a little bit too much too soon, and I zone out of it because I stopped believing it. And I know it's Star Wars, but I stopped believing it. And so, yeah, they meet up with Han Solo inevitably and Chewbacca, and that's great. And it's really nice seeing the old characters, the old cast coming back. A notable thing with the sequel trilogy for me is that I just don't really like Kylo Ren much as a villain. As much as I think he's played well at points by Adam Driver, I think he's a good actor. I don't like the backstory of him. It ruins the happy ending of Han and Leia. But more than that, it's kind of just lazy writing. Why did it have to be Ben Solo? You've got an entire galaxy of people you could have chosen from, and it's yet again another redemption arc for someone that was in the family, and it feels it's been done. And also the mask that he wears, I know why he's doing it, and he's trying to live up to Darth Vader, but it really doesn't work. And as for Domhnall Gleeson playing the part of General Hux, I think that role is just miscast, and I just don't believe him in that role, quite frankly. On the positive note, I should say a saving grace of this trilogy is that I do really like Finn and Rey as characters. I don't think they're fully explored and realised as much as they could have been, to say the least. But especially in this movie, I think they are both really fun to watch on screen. So there is that. But I feel that the First Order just sort of, they're not sort of introduced well enough for me. I would have liked, they just don't feel as huge or as threatening as the Empire, even though they are meant to be bigger, and the big weapon is meant to be even bigger than the Death Star, and everything. You know, it's kind of a rehash in some ways of the sort of plot of A New Hope, and yeah, the infiltration of going into that. But yeah, it's all right. 7 out of 10. Number 5, Revenge of the Sith. And there is the cardboard sleeve as well. Now, from the offset, this movie is a bit better than the two prequels that preceded it. Actually, quite a lot better. It commits a lot of the same sort of CGI sins. I'm not a big fan of General Grievous. I don't have anything particularly against him, but just not a big fan of that character. But all the Emperor scenes and that sort of the way he's slowly working on Anakin, and the stories like, you know, bits like, have you ever heard the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise, and that entire scene? And there's lots of stuff like that I think really sort of sets a sort of deeper tone to this movie. And then, of course, it kicks into the final third where it all goes very wrong, and Anakin admittedly changes a little bit too easily to the dark side. And I don't know why the Emperor sounds quite so weird when he suddenly goes, "The Force strong." It suddenly speaks really weird. I just thought I'd note that bit. But so there's bits that I find clunky about the transformation to the dark side. But overall, I think the tone of it is handled well. Padme comes across very well. Natalie Portman is much better generally in this movie, actually, than the previous two movies. In The Phantom Menace particularly, her dialogue seems very sort of stilted. That's not the fault of her as an actress, it's just that the dialogue was bad, basically. And yeah, the lightsaber battle is it's a real dichotomy, because some of it looks awful, like really like something out of a computer game where they're jumping on top of the sort of hovering things on top of the lava. However, you know, that some of the dialogue between them, the emotion that is conveyed, the end bit when you know, I've got the high ground. People say they get annoyed by that line. I don't have a problem with that. That could relate to so many things. It could be that whenever they sparred together, whenever one of them had the high ground, the other one would, you know, he'd have the advantage. Or it could be, I don't know. I haven't done a lot of lightsaber battles, so I don't know. But people, I don't have a problem with that line. And he jumps and then he cuts his arm and his legs off, and that I do really find, yeah, I mean, honestly, quite a dramatic scene, and really, really quite, you know, suitably violent and grotesque in all the right ways. And it's absolutely marvelous that they didn't duck out on all the graphic nature of that. And if, of course, you know, when the mask comes down and he fully transforms into the sort of masked Darth Vader, that, and you hear the first breath, that really is spine chilling. The fight between Yoda and the Emperor is great. I love all those scenes, and it just works very well, and it's great fun to watch. So yeah, I think it's genuinely is actually a really good movie. It's the only thing that really lets it down. Yeah, a bit of ropey dialogue, but mostly it's the sort of strange CGI that just they overdid with these movies. It was quite groundbreaking at the time, in many respects, but yeah, it's only for that reason that otherwise it would be higher. I give that an 8.5. An important thing to note actually about the prequel trilogy and what it does very well is that with the original trilogy and indeed the sequel trilogy, it all exists on the periphery of the Star Wars universe, in the obscure places where the battles are happening. Whereas with the prequel trilogy, you get to see the densely populated areas, the epic cities, and that really does expand the scope of the Star Wars universe. And as much as, you know, I have criticisms of the prequels, they have done, you know, they do a very good job of just making that, you know, the whole thing much bigger. Oh, I nearly forgot to add this, but I will just say this as well. Yes, obviously, Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker are way too young in the prequel trilogy. They should have made them older to match up sort of with the timelines of the original trilogy. But they went with it that way because they wanted to have some younger people involved. I kind of get that. There's a number of plot holes throughout Star Wars. I mean, what was the plan when they went into Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi? I'm guessing they didn't go with Plan A, Plan B, or Plan C. There was probably a talk they had before. It won't come down to Plan D, but if it does, you know, and that's what they obviously rolled with. But yes, I just thought I'd mention that. Number 4, Rogue One. Of all the movies that aren't part of the original trilogy, this is definitely my favourite, and it just has a story that feels much more gritty and engaging. Bit of pacing issues in the first sort of 2/3 or so of the movie at points, but I really like Jen, the character, and her backstory, and the sort of relationship with her father, and of course the whole seeing the Death Star and sort of just as it's sort of building towards what it does in A New Hope. K2SO is a great droid. I mean, it's such a good droid. Gives R2D2 and C3PO a run for their money. It's like a really great character. Lots of really great characters throughout the movie. A sort of a tragic, poignant ending as well, really showing that sort of the sort of desperation of that the rebels went through to get those plans. That whole end battle sequence really is the real gold dust of this movie. When I always remember that scene where the Star Destroyers come out of hyperspace and just sort of crash into the other things, and the way where it all looks the way you want it to look. You've got the little clips as well, the X-wing fighters you see in the Battle of Yavin in the next movie. It kind of is, and I just think it works really well with that, all those elements sort of thrown together. And then you've got the Darth Vader scene. Well, there's a couple of them, but you know the one I'm talking about towards the end. Absolutely spine-chilling and really well executed. What slightly just drops the score down for me on this movie is the terrible CGI of Grand Moff Tarkin, and particularly, well, both of them equally in their own ways, but Leia at the end. Why? I just thought, come on, you've got to do it convincingly, and you haven't done it convincingly. They didn't do it with Luke either in The Mandalorian, and I just think if you're going to actually show someone's face, you can't do it in a way that it doesn't look quite right and uncanny. Someone on YouTube has already improved it a bit. Even that's not perfect, but if they'd done that, I would have felt better about it. I'm actually taking an entire point off for that. Another half a point for little minor pacing things. So yeah, sadly it ends up being an 8.5 when it could have just easily been a 9.5, just a fraction off perfection. But I'm not letting them off that. Shock horror. The original trilogy has made it to the top 3. Probably not a great surprise for many of you there. What is it that makes the original trilogy so much better than all the subsequent movies that have all kind of fallen short to varying degrees? Well, first of all, the original trilogy still has its fair share of some fairly dodgy acting at points, some pretty ropey dialogue, but it's all done in such a way where there's a real magic to the execution of it, and it all ties together perfectly with this kind of a poetic flow that is very much helped by the music of John Williams. Now, he did the music for the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy as well. And the prequel trilogy has some particularly fantastic musical moments that really does get very stirring, and especially in Revenge of the Sith towards the end, and obviously Duel of the Fates that I mentioned earlier. The sequel trilogy I find to be a lot less memorable musically, despite having some nice moments. The best moments musically are the bits that reference back to musical themes in the original trilogy. With the original trilogy, you listen to the music by John Williams, and you know the bit of the movie it comes from, and you can trust me. I've cleaned up my room to the Battle of Yavin or the Battle of Endor or I don't know, whatever. Sometimes I play little different sections of the soundtracks because I want to get something done, and it's just great. And you are fully in the film in a way that I don't think there are very few other movies that do that. I don't think any other movies really do that to quite the same extent in their entirety as these 3 soundtracks I've got here of the original trilogy. These are the special edition soundtracks, and there are a few musical changes that were made. So that's another good thing that was about the special edition, is that you got this this sort of full 2-disc versions of the soundtracks for the first time. So that's truly excellent. I will just say, if you're looking for the original version of Yub Nub, strangely, this one here, the version that it has on here, is not the proper version of Yub Nub. It's some weird version that kind of goes into the end titles, and it just sounds awful. And also, Lapti Nek, it's a completely different version. I don't know why they didn't put the version on that is the way it sounds in the film. Someone on YouTube did do a really cool edit that mixed the 2 versions together, so you have a full version of the song. But I think it's been taken down now, which is a shame. Anyway, there you go. Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room, and let's talk about the special edition. Now, in 1995, they released these, the last VHS releases of the original trilogy. And they said that at the time on the TV. They said, the advert said, the original trilogy available for the last time, and didn't really think much of it. And then 2 years later, 97, went to see the special editions at the cinema, and was really excited to see Star Wars at the cinema for the first time. I'd only ever seen it on VHS before that. My brother had seen it at the cinema years prior. And so not only did I get to see all the changes, the new bits they added in, which at the time I was just excited by. Oh, anything new that was anything new to add to Star Wars was great. I was nudging my brother all the time, these new bits are coming. Oh, look, it's a new bit, yeah. And he's like, yes, I know, And of course, then I got to see all the bits that were on either side of the screen that I hadn't seen before. So that was great. I didn't think for one second that the original versions would be just made wholly unavailable officially. They did sort of make it available at a later point, but we'll come to that. Let's go through the changes that I think are abysmal and terrible. Greedo didn't fire. He did not fire first. This is the who shot first thing, isn't it? No, it was not a case of who shot first. Han shot Greedo. End of. The Jabba the Hutt scene is just awful. I don't know why they felt the need to add that in. It looks terrible. They improved the look of Jabba the Hutt for the subsequent DVD release, but it still looked rubbish, and the whole scene was rubbish. And it was just, why is it in there? I'm on the fence, or used to be on the fence, about the Battle of Yavin sequence and all the changes that happened with that. That's a good example of one I'm sort of unsure about. But when I recently saw the despecialized edition again, watching how it originally looked, I thought, actually, that was a really groundbreaking historical piece of visual effects. And I've got to be honest, there's nothing wrong with them. There's a couple of shots that perhaps are a little bit static, but I'd prefer to see that any day over a new fangled version. As for The Empire Strikes Back, I actually think most of the changes do work. The Emperor scene I wasn't so sure about when I first saw it, and it was in the 2004 DVD release they first put that in. I wouldn't have minded so much if the Emperor looked more like he did in the original trilogy, but he just looked a bit more like he did in the prequel trilogy, and I felt the dialogue was a bit clunky. I think the original dialogue was better. I get why they changed the voice of Boba Fett. I didn't like the fact that they had done that to begin with. Over the years, I've come to accept that. Return of the Jedi, though, it has the most contentious changes. Lapti Nek was the original song in Jabba's palace, and that was a great song. There are different versions of it up on YouTube, but they replaced it with Jedi Rocks, which is just a terrible, terrible song. Awful, cheesy, really bad CGI. I didn't need the extra mouth coming out of the Sarlacc pit, and the worst thing that they could possibly change, they make Darth Vader say no at the end. The one of the climactic scene where he's looking between the Emperor and Luke, and he just makes the decision. It's a calm and collected decision. It's a moment of realization, and the music is doing everything there. You don't need him to go no. Oh, and Hayden Christensen appearing at the end, and they've removed Yub Nub. Now, I think the new bit of music they put in is more grandiose. I actually really like the piece of music, and I think it does work. But you removed Yub Nub, and I cannot forgive them for removing Yub Nub. Now, having had a really good moan about all the special edition changes I don't like, there were some that I think were really cool. The best example, or one of the best examples, would be the additions to Cloud City, which I still think are fantastic. But the simple fact of the matter is, you should give people the choice. You should make both versions available, and I do not know why, I cannot comprehend it, why a trilogy of movies that were known to millions of people around the world and were an important moment in history of movie making have just not been made available, and they're just refusing to officially release them. Now, they did kind of release them. They did a limited edition, which I bought, of all the 3 original movies there, which had a bonus disc, and on that bonus disc they included the original theatrical versions. Well, they kind of did. They put them in a 4:3 ratio. You could zoom in. So, I mean, it was a 4:3 with black lines at the top and bottom. So you could zoom in and you could make it fill the screen. That's not the only problem with it, though. It's not remastered. We know that these movies were remastered on the VHS versions that were released in 1995. They did that as the first stage in the restoration of the movie before they then added the special edition stuff. Now I'm going to present an example of how it should be done properly. Steven Spielberg, that was the special edition of E.T., but there was a whole backlash against that, and with very good reason. And so he was respectful to his fans and released the original version available again. I don't know if it's been done on Blu-ray, one would hope, but it's very simple, the solution. You give people the choice between all the versions that are released, and you can make it available in whatever format, multiple formats. Give people the choice. Let's face it, though, we could all be waiting a very long time for that to happen, if at all. I mean, I really do hope it happens someday soon. But this is why it's important to mention the despecialized edition. It's been done by a guy called Harmy. You need to check out his YouTube channel if you're not familiar with him already. The guy's a legend. He's just basically gone through and pretty much single-handedly, though, using source material from various different sources, edited together and made the best approximation possible that you can get of the original versions of the movies, but digitally remastered without blips all over the screen and stuff as the old copies that are around, like the limited edition bonus discs. He's basically brought it up to a Blu-ray standard, and he's had to digitally remove some of the special edition special effects at points. I mean, it's a really laborious process he's had to go through, and it's taken him years. And respect to him, because, you know, the last 2 times I've watched these movies, I have watched the despecialized editions. Now, don't ask me in what context I watched them, because I'm not going to reveal that to you, because it occupies a grey area. I don't even know. Am I even allowed to watch them? This is the ridiculous world that we now live in, that in order to watch the versions of the movie that are the proper versions, that were the original versions, you have to kind of go through this sort of, oh, have you got the despecialized edition there? People just want to watch Star Wars. Anyway, but check out his stuff. He goes into details about how he is doing it, and he does emphasize himself how he doesn't really want people making money out of his despecialized editions. He's doing it just as a way of restoring history to what it should be. An important thing that I should make clear, and this has been really stressed importantly by a lot of the people who have talked about the despecialized edition, and I think Harmy says it as well, is that you should own the official Blu-ray versions. So there you go, I have them, and yeah, so that is the rule. It's to be shared between people who already own the official versions. And like I said, again, officially you're not really meant to make any money out of selling it or anything like that. So there you go. Anyway, so let's stop having an angry moan, and because I didn't show you this earlier, let's get on to the original trilogy. Oh, sorry, and one final thing. Here is the special edition box set of the VHS that I got at the time, which was I think a relatively limited edition gold packaging there. There's the individual videos there. Da-da. Da-da. And just to let you know that everything from this point onwards is a 10 out of 10. My brother did have the original VHS editions from the 1980s as well, which I think is worth noting. But people used to just get rid of their VHSs because they sort of didn't realise that in years to come it would be quite interesting to have them. So sadly, we don't have them anymore. And he had the widescreen editions that were brought out in 88 or whatever, but anyway, that was all a whole thing at the time, although it was like tiny on your screen at the time. So anyway, there you go. Let's go on. Original trilogy, here we go. Number 3. Now, I couldn't decide which DVD version to go with to show here, so I'm just going to show them both. You ready? A New Hope. That's right. I know I've caused controversy already by putting this one where I put it. Ta-da! Yeah, this is the movie where it all began. Originally called Star Wars, then in 1981 retitled A New Hope. And what a great opening scene with the 2 spaceships flying overhead. And you get to meet C-3PO, R2-D2, and then briefly the Princess and Darth Vader, before, you know, you sort of left on the desert planet. I mean, you know the plot of the film. It's a story of like a farmer boy sort of going from zero to hero. So he's sort of from lowly beginnings to going down the Death Star trench at the end. They meet the swashbuckling, sort of reluctant hero that is Han Solo. Then you have Princess Leia, who is the princess in distress in this movie, who can hold her own. The reason I say it that way is because in a 1970s movie, that wasn't necessarily a guaranteed thing. She gives as good as she gets in this movie in the face of, quite frankly, insurmountable odds. Of all the movies, perhaps this is the one where she comes across as the strongest in some respects. You got a big Death Star, which in this movie, you know, you get to see it do its full-on thing. It's the only movie where you get to see it fully blow up a planet. That's the sort of full extent of its powers, and it's shown its full glory here. This movie obviously has two classic actors as well. Peter Cushing playing the part of Grand Moff Tarkin. He's obviously in charge of the Death Star, so in many respects, while they're on the Death Star at least, Darth Vader is kind of subordinate to him, but they're not in the least bit intimidated by each other in any respect. So that's an interesting sort of interplay of power. Then you have, and this is probably one of the elements that sort of pops this movie below the two movies that followed on afterwards, is you've got the first lightsaber battle that you would ever see in Star Wars. And as much as I still enjoy watching it, I think it's a great scene because the acting's good. They are more or less just tapping each other's lightsabers. It doesn't sort of play out in the same way, to say the least, as any of the other lightsaber battles in Star Wars. But yeah, number 2, The Empire Strikes Back. The controversy is strong with this one. So this one, I'll come to my number 1 choice in a minute, but this one is an improvement over the original, although albeit marginally, because it takes things in a much darker direction. It starts off on the ice planet Hoth. They're obviously on the run from the Empire. You've got the great battle sequence, which is this time towards the beginning of the movie with the Atat walkers. Yes, you can tell they're stop animation, but they still look great. And then suddenly you're going into space through the asteroid belt with the great music by John Williams. Two characters I think are at their strongest in this movie. Han Solo, I think the interplay between him and, well, throughout the asteroid belt sequence, the sort of interplay between him and Leia and sort of getting annoyed with C-3PO really works well, and he really shows how clever he can be as a pilot, and a sort of his thinking outside the box way of getting out of situations. And then we go, obviously, over to Dagobah with Luke, and you've got Yoda, who, again, is at his strongest in this movie. Great and more poignant, perhaps, in the final movie, Return of the Jedi. But this, you really get to see him doing all the sort of training with Luke, albeit over a quite compressed time period. And classic lines, the whole lifting of the X-Wing out. I mean, you know the scenes. But it really is great. Then you have Cloud City, which is an amazing location where, of course, you get to meet Lando, who really shows that he's a person that's giving Han a run for his money on the charm side of things, trying to smooch up to Leia when he first meets her. And speaking of Leia, I've always felt, especially when I was a child, I was quite smitten by her, particularly in this movie. She was one of my first crushes. She has a sort of a sudden look to her throughout this movie, but particularly in Cloud City, she really does belong with them up there in the clouds, as Lando says, somewhat creepily, I may add. As for Darth Vader, he is definitely his most threatening in this movie, strangulating his officers and obviously on the search for Luke Skywalker. In Return of the Jedi, he's a bit more conflicted, and his character's going down a different kind of route, which is equally interesting in its own way. But definitely, he comes across as, without a doubt, being the arch villain of this movie. Although the Emperor is obviously, we're aware, he's lurking in the background. And then you've got the iconic, arguably the most iconic lightsaber battle of the entire Star Wars franchise, and it's inside that weird cathedral space. It's never fully explained what that is. It's obviously near the place where he was going to put him in carbon freeze, but it's like, if you've ever been to the Whispering Gallery in St. Paul's, it's like that times 1,000, and it's never really fully explained. Like, what is that thing that when Luke falls off, he gets sucked into that thing? Was that meant to happen? Is that designed to suck things? What is its purpose? It's so weird, but you don't question it. It's so great looking, and of course it sort of reveals there's a bit of a connection between him and Leia as well. So I just think it is, I mean, obviously I'm not going to hold up things of 10 for this, because they are all 10, these top 3. Number 1, well, you know what this is. Return of the Jedi. For me, there's never been any conflict with regards to this being my favourite Star Wars movie. And as much as I understand why most people would choose Star Wars and New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back as being their favourites, I'm always surprised by how few people actually cite this as being their favourite movie. let's break this down into its constituent elements, because I feel almost a bit overwhelmed to go through the amount of stuff that I want to say about this movie that is really great. So first of all, you got the Emperor. The Emperor is the true arch-villain of the Star Wars saga, and he is at his strongest within this movie. This was the first time that Ian McDiarmid appeared as the Emperor, if you're going by the original versions. And he is I was really scared of him when I saw it. I felt this was the first Star Wars movie I remember seeing for the first time, and it was either Christmas 1990 or 1991 I saw it. It was round about then. But I enjoyed being scared of him. My mum thought I'd be scared of the Rancor. I wasn't bothered by that. So yeah, you got the Emperor. He's just, the amount of iconic lines that he has, and the entire sequence with him and Darth Vader and Luke is amazing. You got the Battle of Endor. The whole space battle thing, for starters, is the most iconic space battle of all time. I've yet to see anything. I've seen bigger scale things, and people, they try and make it like a bigger scale thing in The Rise of Skywalker, but it doesn't match up to the excitement level. And the music as well for this film, the music, especially for that entire sequence, the music by John Williams is sublime. It's amazing. But it's not just that. You're not just having that. It's flicking back and forth between that and the throne room and the battle that's happening on the Endor itself, with the AT-ST walkers going around. Let's talk about the AT-ST walkers. On screen, I think that they look better than the AT-AT walkers. I'm not saying they're as iconic as the AT-AT walkers, the attack walkers. I get that, and yes, but you can tell their stop animation. And albeit, yes, you can tell the AT-STs are stop animation almost, but I look at that and I forget that. I just see them as they're real to me. I see them on screen, I believe it. And the slightly jerky motion is just because they're mechanical. People criticise the Ewoks, but they are the underdog that the Emperor didn't count on. Yes, the arrows do pierce the armour of the stormtroopers a bit too easily, and you could go, but you know what I mean? This is Star Wars. You could pick holes in lots of little things. Treat them as a metaphor if you like, but Ewoks, they kick the arse of the stormtroopers. And actually, let's not forget, they were about to eat the rebel characters, and they're actually, if you get on the wrong side of the Ewoks, well, you don't want to do that, basically. The bit that, when I think of the Battle of Endor, the bit that sticks in my mind is the bit where it's like, the AT-ST walker shoots out one tree, then another tree closer to the screen, and then boom, you're in space and you're flying around space, and Lando's sort of going, whatever he's saying at that particular point, and they're going that, and then suddenly it's the Emperor sort of going, as you can see, and you've got all these different things going on. It's overwhelming, is what it is. You've got, of course, you see the whole underworld of Tatooine with Jabba at the beginning as well. I know it's going to Tatooine again, but it's only the second time round. And let's not forget that, people say that Han Solo is underused in this film, or should we say General Solo? Well, if we think about what he actually achieves in this film, Battle of Yavin, he kind of appears at the last moment, and literally in the battle for the last 30 seconds. You're like, where were you this whole time? In this one, he fully leads the strike team that take out the shield generator, and then yeah. I'm very sorry. Lando flying into the superstructure with Wedge as well, holding tight. We run out of space real quick. Yeah, the Death Star trench in the first movie is great. It's great. It's awesome. It's amazing. But this one, let's face it, you get to go right into the Death Star, and Wedge, as opposed to having to pull away at the last moment because he's, he can't help you back there. He has to get away. This time he knocks out one of the generators on the other side, and they go through the middle. It's so exhilarating, and yes, special edition changes notwithstanding, it is one of the most remarkable movies that you could ever hope to watch. And honestly, a lot of the disputes between the rebel characters have been resolved. I get that that perhaps makes the dynamic between them slightly less interesting, Well, actually, it doesn't for me. I think it's nice that they've resolved their issues because that's the natural place that they would have ended up. So, yeah. Not convinced? Well, let's add a few more things. The speeder bike chase through the forest of Endor, Princess Leia in a bikini, Boba Fett, the fact that you get to see him use his rocket pack for the first time, albeit briefly, and he's dispensed with a bit unceremoniously. But even that I find kind of quite amusing. Warwick Davis as Wicket the Ewok, the poignant farewell of Yoda. The fact that many of the truths that people cling to depend greatly upon their own point of view, which is not a way I would have thought of looking at it before. Prior to that, I just would have thought they were liars. Another thing that I think is important to mention is that a lot of people regard The Empire Strikes Back as being the darkest of the original trilogy. And overall, yes, the tone of the movie is darker generally. But tell me one scene in that movie that is as intense as Luke being electrocuted to death by the Emperor. No mercy, just like he's enjoying it. He is just, now young Skywalker, you will die. And I always remember that thing where he goes to the smile, and then his smile becomes like he's unhappy, and then you see his teeth, and then he just and that moment where Darth Vader has that epiphany and realizes, and so there you go. That's my favourite Star Wars movie. And I have to say, I do feel a little bit sad, actually, that most people see the original trilogy as having a slightly disappointing final chapter. But for me, each episode gets better and better, and I'm one of the few people that actually feels entirely fulfilled, special edition changes notwithstanding, fulfilled by the original trilogy, and I think that it ended exactly the way I would have wanted it to, and it's great. I also just want to give a quick thumbs up to the other two YouTubers, well, at least two YouTubers that have also cited Return of the Jedi as being their favourite Star Wars movie. Nice one, guys. It's good to know I'm not the only one who thinks it. And a lot of their reasonings were similar to mine, actually, when I watched it. It was interesting seeing that. Now, because I'm not going to do a whole separate video on the various different TV series of Star Wars, I just thought I'd mention quickly here. I think The Mandalorian started off very well in the first season. I think it started off very well in the first season. I sort of had a sense that it was doing something new for the Star Wars saga that the sequel trilogy wasn't. Season 2, I liked almost as much. And I think it sort of lost me a bit in the third season. The Andor, I wasn't such a big fan of, although we've got another season coming. Obi-Wan, I did really like. A lot of people criticised it, so that's my very sort of rough sort of guide there. And there's a new one coming out as well, so maybe at some point I'll sort of do one in the future, or maybe a discussion one or something. But that's what I think of that. Anyway, thanks for watching, and what should they remember to do? Eh? That's right. Hit that subscribe button. Oh, and long live Yubnub! Something like that.